Hi, Parth.
Hey Vedant.
Hello, Parth. Thank you very much for coming online with us. And we,
Thank you for
so
having me.
thank you very much. So let me first give everyone a brief introduction about Parth. Parth is an alumnus of IIT Kanpur. He did his engineering from IIT Kanpur. Then he went into consulting. He worked for Bain and Company, and now he's a VC at one of the top venture capital firms in India. So, Parth, with this, let me pass it on to you so that maybe you can tell us a little about what I missed and, broadly what you do, what your background is.
Sure. So, to tell you more about me, uh, I was born in a tier two town in India, and studied there, stayed there. After that, I come from a family of doctors. Everybody, right from my grandfather, father, mother, you know, my uncle, aunt, all of them are doctors. I became the dark horse in the family and switched to an engineering career. Gave the IIT entrance exam, went to IIT Kanpur in chemical engineering. Didn't like all the science around the chemical engineering, but loved problem solving. I did an internship at Dr. Reddy's, and over there, I thought it was going to be a science internship, but it turned out to be more of a business problem solving internship, and that was my first tryst with business problem solving. I was also the overall coordinator of IIT Kanpur's entrepreneurship cell. Got to learn a lot about startups, problem solving there as well. Consulting seemed the best career option for me, given that I was inclined towards problem solving. Hence, applied to all of the three consulting firms, was shortlisted in one and got into Bain and Company. At Bain, I was involved in the private equity arm. I got the opportunity to work with several mid and large cap PE funds and help them perform due diligences on growth startups. Most of my unicorns today. I wanted to be more close to startups after that, and I felt that it's the right time for me to, enter into the VC space. Hence, I joined Venture Highway. At Venture Highway, I typically look at Web3 and software as a service as the key domains here. Yeah, that's about me. Vedant, over
Great,
to you.
great. Thank you very much, Parth, for sharing the brief. And you said that you followed an unusual path as compared to what your family expectations were. So you must be very proud of what you are today, what you are doing today. So how about you tell us a little about why you chose you said that you applied to consulting three all of the three consulting companies.
Yeah.
What made you apply to these three consulting companies?
So I think that in my second year, in out of my 4 years at IIT Kanpur, in my second year, I wanted to be a proper chemical engineer in one of the big chemical engineering companies in India, ITCHUL. Those are the typical companies that people aim at. I wanted to follow the standard path and go into those companies itself. I applied for internships there, but didn't get in. In hindsight, it turned out to be the best thing ever. I got into Dr. Reddy's, which is a pharmaceutical company. I again thought that this was going to be a core chemical engineering internship. Went there, and the problem statement that I had over there was, optimization of a plant. Nothing related to chemical engineering, but more towards establishing a new product in a plant and how do you optimize all the process parameters there. So a business problem rather than a core chemical engineering problem. I think right from my childhood, right from studying for engineering entrance exams, studying chemical engineering, even consulting, the common theme that I've liked across all of this is problem solving. That, as I mentioned, now after my tryst with Dr. Reddy's, I realized that business problem solving is something which I enjoy more as compared to problem solving in chemical engineering. At that point, I was limited to a few options. I wanted to go into product management or consulting. Management consulting seemed an easier way out for me because I think I understood the business part of it. My profile was, I would say, more cut out for consulting rather than product management. Hence, that's the reason why I decided to interview with McKinsey, BCG, and Bain.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that. And So, you said that you like solving problems, and let us try to relate that thing with what you are doing currently.
Right.
And so how many, what time did you spend in the consulting sector?
I spent a year in consulting, and I'm going to complete a year in venture capital in the next 2-3 months.
Great. So you spent 1 year in consulting. Let us try to understand what your experience was in the consulting field before we move on to the VC industry.
Sure, sure. So when I joined Bain, I was thrown into their private equity arm, and over there, the problem statement across most private equity firms is common: should we invest in XYZ particular company or not? And that's the broad problem statement. Now, and there's no fixed framework that I had in my mind before getting into it. Otherwise, what you do in consulting interviews is very different. You learn how to do the profitability case. You learn to figure out the problems in a particular business. Now, the question there was, how do I apply these learnings to a private equity case? And typically, to understand any particular company, you have to understand a few factors of it. First factor is the market. So how large is the total addressable market? What part of that is serviceable? What share of market could that company capture? That's the first aspect that's required to be understood. And what's the market size today, and how is it expected to grow in the future? That's about the market. Second part is the offering itself. Is the pricing done correctly? Is there really a use case for the offering? Does the offering have depth? Is this a good product or not? What's the feedback? What's the NPS or net promoter score for a particular product? That's the second thing. Third thing is the customer. So does the customer have the propensity to pay, and can a business be built around this particular product or not? What's the feedback of the customers? Do what other potential customers can you expand to? That's another aspect that you try to understand. I think the next aspect is the competition. What are other players in this market doing? How large is the competition in this space? Is it a very big threat? Is it a consolidated market? Is it a fragmented market? Can you really take away market share? I think those are the key things that we evaluate while doing a private equity case. In that as well, I started off with few industries. I started off with social commerce first, then did a lot of healthcare, did a lot of IT and BPO. Uh, what I realized is that I enjoyed core technical diligences more than I enjoyed pure business problems, pure business companies. So, I enjoyed the social commerce bit because there was a large tech aspect to it. I enjoyed health tech because there was a large tech aspect to it. So tech is something which I really enjoyed and which I wanted to, move ahead in. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, mm we talked about a brief about you, what you're doing, and what you have done. How about
Yeah,
you tell us, since you mentioned that your background is in chemical engineering,
right.
how is it helping you in your current background? And the question is in a way that you can tell our viewers, how can someone start their education from one field, and
Okay.
how is it relevant to what they want to do in life?
Got it. Got it. So I'll come back to fundamentals. The biggest thing that I learned from chemical engineering is problem solving, and that's the intangible thing. There are a lot of tangible things as well. Talking about problem solving, I think while I was pursuing my education in chemical engineering at IIT Kanpur, I went through a few courses that apart from the that taught me not just the core science of it, but the business aspects of it as well, and how do you actually structure these industries. So developing that structuring mindset, I think that's where chemical engineering really helped me a lot. One of the courses that I did in chemical engineering was also around the economics of chemicals and chemical engineering. How do factories actually work? How do factories actually make money? What are future cash flows related to chemicals? How do you actually calculate them? How do you do the discounted cash flow analysis? That's one of the courses that I did at IIT Kanpur, which was a core chemical engineering course, but it had a very big business aspect to it. Another thing that chemical engineering really helped me in is developing a good grip over one particular space, and that was chemicals as a space. Uh, if and allied industries as well. So while I was giving an interview in consulting as well, I got a few questions around, the chemical industry, allied industries like paper, pulp, and cases were built around that. So me coming from a chemical engineering background, from an industrial background, that gave me a very good, way to give recommendations, very good insights that I could give to my client, and that's what really helped me get into Bain. Another aspect of that is that we were recently in my current VC fund. We were recently evaluating a manufacturing tech company. I was able to understand the tech aspect of it very, very well, given my background in chemical engineering. So that's how it's helping me in my current scenario. Now, coming back to how do you actually switch fields? I think it's more about trying out different things while you're in college and while you're in the campus. For example, while I was in campus, chemical engineering really gave me an insight on, really helped me develop that structuring mindset. I was able to use that structuring mindset while pursuing several leadership roles as well. I was a part of IIT Kanpur's entrepreneurship cell, and over there, I we conducted a lot of different events. We helped a lot of IIT Kanpur startups to connect with different VCs. I was able to apply my learnings in structuring and thinking in general to there as well. That really helped build my profile, and I think the entrepreneurship cell part of it really helped enhance my business sense. Now I had chemical engineering as a part of my knowledge, business sense as a part of my knowledge, structuring as a part of my knowledge. I think to put a cherry on top, my experience in my internship really helped because it was a business problem that I was trying to solve. So that was the cherry on top. I think after that, I had a mental model now from which I can learn things very quickly, given that I had a diverse experience. And so I had a mental model through which I was able to grasp things very quickly and build upon them. And that really helped during my consulting preparation. Given that I was able to learn about so many different industries in the span of 2-3 months of preparation and give consulting interviews and get into one of them, I think my background and my previous experience really helped in that. So I think the dots really connected. uh, Anybody who wants to get into a non-technical role from a technical background, I think the first thing that they should look at is building out their resume, trying out different things. For example, for consulting, while giving consulting interviews, you require several peaks on your resume. You are required to have diverse experiences. Those diverse experiences could include your academics, a project that you've done which got converted into a research paper. It could include any good exam that you gave. It could include a very good impact that you made on your internship. It could include an impact or a learning that you had while pursuing a position of responsibility at your college. So developing that profile is step one. I think once that step one is cleared, it's all about case preparation if you want to get into consulting. Yeah.
Sure. And so while you are talking about your experiences, I would like to take a moment to say this to audience. Please feel free to write your questions on the comment section if you have any for Parth. And we have one question, uh, Parth, and feel free to answer it whenever you like.
Sure.
Uh, so you uh, you mentioned that problem solving abilities and some of the general skills is something that you learned, and what should be the I mean, what are the general set of traits or skill set or abilities that are important for anyone to get or to have so that they can easily enter into this space, VC space?
So I think since we're talking about VC right now, I'll keep my answer specific to that. So talking about the VC space, I think there are a set of skills that you need. First skill, which is common in consulting as well, is the abilities to structure things well and get things done. And by that I mean, if you're looking at a market, if you're confused about how to look at it and you don't have a framework in mind about how to evaluate a market or how to evaluate a company, it's an ocean. you can get lost. So having that structured mindset and identifying what are the key 3-4 critical things that you have to look at, and from those you can derive an answer as, you know, is this a good market or is this a good company or not. uh, I think having that skill set is the most fundamental thing that you require to get into a VC. Talking about other tangible things, I think having a good network really helps in VC. Given that at the junior most level, you would be involved in sourcing startups, talking to different founders, building a point of view on different spaces, building theses. Over there, having a very strong network, and by network I mean connected to other VCs, connected to founders, having a good pipeline of deals, that really helps, because that will help you get things done and create an impact on your own self. VC is a very independent job, so you have to drive things on your own. I think the third most important skill set is to be able to work in an unstructured, unsupervised environment. And because unlike consulting, VC is very unstructured. In consulting, you are given one task which you have to complete in 3-4 hours. In venture capital, you're given 20 tasks which you have to do in 3 days. Now, how do you essentially plan your day? What do you do first? What's the priority? You know, essentially managing your time well, working in an unstructured environment, unsupervised environment, working on your own, making critical decisions on your own. That's very important in a VC role. So I think these three would be the critical skills which you require to get into a venture capitalist role in India.
Sure, sure, sure. You also mentioned that you did an internship in the field of chemical engineering, but currently, before getting into that, what sectors are you looking at while being a VC?
So essentially, uh, I look at a lot of sectors, but I think my specializations include, you know, Web3 and software as a service. Other sectors that I look at include edtech, fintech, mostly on the broad end. But I think Web3, software as a service, create economy are the things that I've gone deep into.
Okay. I see emerging technologies as a common among most of the
Yes.
subjects that you mentioned. So, coming from a background of chemical engineering, you mentioned that you worked as an intern in a chemical company. How did that experience help you in getting into consulting and eventually into VC?
Got it. Got it. So I'll tell you the journey about my, internship first. I did an intern at Dr. Reddy's. Uh, Most of my friends out there, they got a very technical problem statement, and a research oriented problem statement, that, you know, we have to create a recipe for XYZ particular chemical or something else. The problem statement that I was given was to, uh, transfer the production of one of the key products of my intern's company from US to India. And that was a problem statement, that it was a very business oriented problem statement. Additionally, on the top of that, doing an entire risk analysis of, would factories in India be able to support the product or not, would they able to provide the right yield or not. Answering those specific questions really helped. I think, the supervisor that I worked with, he left it on me to find a solution and how should I solve this particular problem. So it became a very independent project on its own. Now, I think in the span of 2 months, in the first month, I just thought about how do we solve this particular problem? What framework do I use? Uh, how do I structure this particular problem? Once I got the structure of doing entire risk analysis, I think in the second month it just became a matter of execution and getting things done, and it happened very quickly. My supervisor really liked what I did, the approach that I took, and I was offered a pre-placement offer at Dr. Reddy's. Now, moving 2 months ahead into this process, uh, while I was applying for consulting firms, having a PPO and the impact that I was able to show on my resume really helped me get shortlisted, and really helped me, engage my interviewers while I was interviewing with Bain as well. That's point number one. Point number two, the independent environment, the independence that I got at, Dr. Reddy's. That just allowed me to think through any problem on my own. And I think that's a skill that most people lack these days. Independent, structured thinking. That's what my intern really provided me. And I think that was the fundamental skill required for consulting. Structuring, getting, cases done on your own, without the help of others. Also using data. I was able to arrive to, my conclusions and my recommendations at Dr. Reddy's by looking at data. So picking out key things from data and converting them into recommendations and insights, that's very critical. And I think that really helps in consulting. So combining all these 3 4 things, they really helped me in my interview at Bain.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. And so, what according to you can people
Yeah,
do while they are in college?
sure.
How can they improve their profile so that they can get shortlisted for eventually for a VC firm?
Got it. Got it. So I'll talk about consulting and VC both in this case. We'll first start off with consulting because that would be easier to answer, and then talk about VC. So while in college, if you're in your first or second year, the best thing that you can do is try out different things and create an impact in whatever you do. If you're into sports, do your best at it, and uh, play different competitions and win over there. If you're pursuing a position of responsibility, make sure that you create an impact and make sure people laud you for your efforts there. If you're pursuing academics, make sure that you get very good grades there. So I think the key to success in getting shortlisted in a consulting role is being the best at what you do and being good at multiple things. So trying out different things early on, building upon them and rising to the top, and being the best at a few specific things, which consulting firms like to call peaks. Building those peaks early on would really help. uh, at the same time, given that people would be early in their journeys, uh, they should ensure that they build 3 4 peaks in their resume, and they're able to capitalize on that when consulting firms really come. People who are ahead in the curve and in their third year and they're going to interview with consulting firms, I think the best that they could do is add a whatever they have done till now, they should really analyze what are the 3 4 things that really make an impact, and what are the 3 4 things that really set them aside, and make sure that they highlight that very well in their resume. That's very critical. And prepare for cases well. I'll tell you my story. I don't think that I had the perfect profile for a consulting firm, and that's why I didn't get shortlisted in 2 of the consulting firms. However, given that I was able to highlight my achievements very well, highlight my impact very well, uh, from there I was able to get shortlisted in one of the consulting firms, and then go on to give my interviews very well, do case preparation very well, and then get in. Now, translating this to VC, I think VC is a different ball game altogether. Uh, as I said, in VC, the critical things that you require is a very good network. So make sure that you start building your network early on. And by network, I mean talking to different VCs, talking to different founders, getting that pipeline that I mentioned. Having that, given that the Indian VC industry is more network based than merit based, it really helps to have a network. So network building that network would be one critical thing. Second thing is studying about two particular sectors and owning them end to end. That really helps in cracking a VC interview. And by that, I mean, let's say if you're picking up healthcare and social commerce, you should know each and everything about healthcare and social commerce. I'll give you an example. I took up social commerce. So the questions to that you have to answer over there is, first of all, what is social commerce? What are the good models that exist right now? And how is the market expected to grow? At the second level, there's out of these models, which model is the best? How is each model going to pan out in the future? The next level would be in every specific model, what are the key startups that are there, and is there a white space in each of these models? Is there really a scope to start up in each of these models? After that, once you're at the startup level, you should be able to identify one startup which the VC fund would not have been able to look at and would be lucrative for the VC fund in each of those models. I think if you're able to answer this, you have a very good point of view on that particular industry, and that would set you apart and create a point of differentiation for you while you're interviewing with VC funds. The third thing is, again, having a very stellar resume really helps. Having different experiences, having business related experiences. So working in a startup, working in a consulting firm, working in an investment bank would really help you move to a VC role. So I think these three would be the critical things that anyone early on and who wants to get into VC or consulting should really look at. It's a bit hard to break into consulting right after your undergraduation, because VC firms right after your undergraduation, because VC firms tend to prefer experienced candidates. Hence, building upon that, building pursuing good careers uh, early in your life, like when you're like consulting or a startup role, would really help you increase your chances for a VC role.
Sure. So let us try to understand more about the structure of VC firms. So
Sure.
what is the initial point of entry, and what are the top positions that are there in VC firms? Can you please give a give an intro to us about that?
Sure. So most VC firms these days are hierarchy-less, but I'll tell you what's the typical hierarchy that exists in VC funds. At the bottommost layer, there's an analyst. As you rise up, there's the associate level. And I'll tell you what roles pertain to all of these as well. So analyst, above that is associate, above that is a VP or a principal, and at the topmost layer it's the partner that usually exists. Now the roles of each of these is very different. I think the key north star metric for an analyst is sourcing startups and doing diligence. As you go up, it becomes more on the diligence side, and driving the entire deal. And that's how the responsibilities increase. For example, once you become an associate, there's a lot of diligence that you have to do and own the entire diligence, right from the market to the offering to the competition, to the customer feedbacks, owning that entirely and making a decision very quickly. I think as you go to a VP and a principal, you lead the entire aspect, and you get into other things as well, like fundraising for the venture capital fund, working with LPs, working with portfolio companies, and you do get a flavor of that with you know in an analyst and an associate role as well. But that becomes very critical at the VP and principal level. The partner is in charge of everything, right from fundraise to overseeing the entire fund to giving the vision to a VC fund. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for sharing that. And what are the typical entry points for undergrads and master degree holders?
So undergrads typically join at the analyst level after a few years of work experience, after 1 to 2 years of work experience in different options like consulting, startups, MBA. Recent MBA graduates, they typically join VC funds at the associate level, and a bit more experienced MBA graduates join it at a senior associate or a VP level. Those are the typical entry points with them.
Sure, sure. And what so in India we are seeing a good flow of venture capital
Hmm.
in the last set of years. What is your idea about the growth of this particular sector? Maybe you can talk about a particular subject industry, but overall I would like to understand what are your views on this industry, as in what are the growth prospects of this industry as a whole.
So I think a good way to describe this industry would be cyclic. And by that, I mean, there are times when there's a lot of capital in the market and there's a lot of deal flow happening, a lot of people starting up, and it gets very, very exciting. And then there are times like right now when, deal flow decreases because market conditions are not apt. So it's more cyclic because market always follows a cycle. There are bear cycles, there are bull cycles, and I think everyone who's given that VCs and PEs both are responsive to these cycles, their activity changes according to each cycle. So in a bull cycle, when things are going very, very good, you typically get a lot of deal flow. There's a lot of, startups, founders starting up. You meet them a lot. There's a lot of work that's involved. When there's a bear cycle, I think it's the right time to step back, decide on how you should, strategize your further fundraise, how you should think about different spaces, and essentially reflect on what's been your strategy in the past and how you should strategize for the future. I think bear cycles are the best time for that. Now, explain that with an example. Uh, you know, I typically look at the Web3 space. Now, in Web3, I think from 2017 onwards, the entire crypto space took off, and it really, really accelerated in the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021. And a lot of startups began starting up in this space. Several unicorns were born, and a lot of different use cases started coming up. But given that it's so early, there's a lot of red flags in the space as well at the moment, which would be eventually solved as and when things improve. But a lot of deal flow in the early stage happened in the last 2 years, and I think in the first quarter of 2022 as well. But things seem to be slowing down with the coming bull cycle. We all saw what happened to one of the a lot of cryptocurrencies recently in the last 2-3 weeks. Hence, it's a lot about sentiment. If the sentiment of the market is good, things are going to be very active for VCs. If if the sentiment is going to be not good, it would be the right time to step back and reflect. Overall, it's a very exciting job. I think I get to learn every day. It's a very large learning curve. I think much faster than most career options out there. So if you want to learn, venture capital could be a very good career option for you.
Sure. How about you tell us, what your day in the life of a VC at Venture Highway looks like?
Got it. So I'll talk through the things that I do. I would say 40 to 50% of my time goes into sourcing startups and talking to them. So a lot of time goes on calls. I think the entire first half of the day goes on calls, talking to founders, talking to different VCs, getting more deal flow, understanding about different spaces. I would club all of this into sourcing. So a lot of time goes into sourcing and calls. I would say some amount of time goes into thesis building. So building a thesis on different verticals and how you should think about different verticals, understanding different spaces, and essentially getting a view on what you have to invest in and what you don't have to invest in. That involves thesis making. So that involves reading a lot of different articles, talking to different founders and getting their point of views, and essentially creating your own point of view out of from the data points that you have. So a lot of thought goes there. I would say next, a lot of my time goes into portfolio work. So supporting, portfolio in various different aspects, helping them build their GTM, helping them in hiring, uh, you know, flagging any red flags, understanding the metrics, understanding on, what could be going wrong in a particular portfolio company and how could they improve their narrative, help them in their, further fundraises. So that's, I would say, the third aspect. Then a lot of operational things as well, like writing notes, a lot of emails that you have to attend to. That's also a part of the work. So at a broad level, that would involve my day. I would say that work timings are much better than consulting, but there's still a lot of work that you have to do. As I said, it's a lot of different things going on at the same time. Hence, planning out your day is very important there. But there's a lot of flexibility as well. Given that deadlines are much more spread out, there's more flexibility. You can decide what you have to do when you have to do. So let's say that I don't want to do something for 2 hours in the evening, let's say from 7 to 9 p.m. I can push them to later from 12 to 1 a.m. as well, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. as well. So I get to decide my time. I have more control over my time, unlike consulting. Yeah.
Sure. And is this is the statement, or is this true for other companies as well? just trying to understand what the VC space looks like. Is it the same for other companies as well, other firms as well?
So it's broadly the same, but every VC fund has their own culture, and they determine, the culture determines what an analyst does. So, some VC funds might be over indexed on sourcing, some VC funds might be over indexed on, portfolio. So it changes from, VC to VC, but at the broad level, these are the aspects that you try and cover in an analyst role. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, you mentioned that you did some leadership work at, while you were in college. How, what, what do you think? What is the importance of such extracurricular or leadership activities while people are studying, while being in college?
Hmm. So, I was the overall coordinator of IIT Kanpur's entrepreneurship cell. Over there, I think, key things that I was able to achieve. I think, given that we conduct one of the largest, you know, entrepreneurship summits in India, so learning how to manage a large team, uh, and accommodating all of their point of views. So that really gave me a taste into leadership. Working with a large fund and how do you allocate money, that gave me into a taste of how do you manage finances, how do you look at, allocating and budgeting money. So that's one thing that I really learned while pursuing, a leadership role at entrepreneurship cell. Second thing, and which really created impact on me, and that's one of the programs that we run, is a program called Startup Internship Program at IIT Kanpur. It's run by, the entrepreneurship cell itself, in which we really help, students in their first and second years get internships, even third years get internships in startups. And the aim for that is not to give people internships, but to give people a flavor of working in a startup, and how, the culture in a startup is very different from a culture in in a full-fledged organization or an enterprise. So giving them that flavor, I think that's one mission that I'm, really proud of, that we've been able to fulfill as an organization as a whole. And it really sets us apart from other entrepreneurship cells in India. So I think that's one impact that we've created. Lastly, helping different startups in general spring up from IIT Kanpur. That's also the role of entrepreneurship cell. So helping any startup, any founder who wants to start up and needs any kind of help, any kind of support, connecting them with different VCs, founders, connecting them with incubators. That's something which we, typically help out at. So all of these different things gave me a taste into leadership, taste into structuring and problem solving, that really helped me in my career and is still helping me. It also helped me form my network that I required for venture capital. So yeah, as I said, dots connect.
Hmm. And what apart from, so uh, you said you did your internship where you experienced, you had a good experience basically,
Hmm.
and learned a couple of good things.
Hmm.
You were involved in a couple of leadership activities,
Hmm.
extracurricular stuff.
Yeah.
What apart from this would you advise for someone to to do while they're in college, if they want to get into consulting or VC, or basically a good paying job primarily in the VC field?
I would say a lot of these things help, consult in consulting and VC, doing different things, having different experiences, and being observant while doing different things helps. So getting a good perspective is what the aim of any student should be if they want to enter into consulting and VC. And how do they get a good consulting? By trying out different things and trying them out very seriously, so that they really create something out of it. I'll give you an example. If you're doing sports, be good at it, in be involved in various different competitions, go for tournaments, perform there. That would really give you perspective on different aspects of, how do you play in a team, how does teamwork essentially work. These are unsaid skills which are very, very, very critical for a consulting and a VC role. Second thing is working on different research projects. I did that a lot. I even got some publications which really helped me into getting into consulting. Now, how does that help? Essentially, given that you're reading through different things, you build a perspective. Even if you're doing research on, let's say, chemical engineering, you're building a perspective on the chemical engineering industry. If you're doing, let's say, if you're writing a research paper on, Estonia's e-governance, that's one topic that I wrote a paper on. You build a very good perspective on how blockchain could really help in daily governance activities. So I think building a perspective should be the goal. Doing different activities, whether it's sports, whether it's academics, whether it's writing a research paper, whether it's pursuing any extracurricular activity like dance, all of that adds up to getting into a consulting role, and that further adds up to getting into a VC role. So, because VC is not just about being technical and being knowledgeable, it's about being able to judge a founder very good. See, businesses are not created by business models, they're created by founders. I think the most critical part of any business is the founder. So being able to evaluate a founder is very, very critical. And that skill of evaluation only comes when you have the right perspective, when you have a broader perspective, and when you can see things at a very deep level as well, and at a very high level as well. So being able to see things from different perspectives is, I think, the most critical skill in any corporate role.
Absolutely. And what are the things, not getting into things, but what is the general advice that you would like to give to the viewers who are primarily students or in their early part, early stage of the career?
Got it, got it. I think I covered that in brief in one of my answers, but I think just to reiterate on that, uh, trying out different things and building peaks on your resume would really help you get shortlisted into a consulting firm. And by trying out different things, as I've already mentioned, sports, research, and over there creating an impact. That's very critical. Getting a good position of responsibility, creating an impact over there, getting a good internship, getting a PPO over there. Those really help set those peaks right, and give a very broad resume or CV that you can really pitch to any consulting or VC firm. And that would essentially be a reflection of how large your perspective is towards any particular topic, any particular you know domain, and how much could you add value in terms of perspective. See, both consulting and VC are games of opinions. You're paid to share your own opinion, and you can only share an opinion if you have one, and you only have one if you have a perspective. So reiterating on that, building points that convey that you have a point of view, have an opinion, is very, very critical. So for an early stage person, trying out different things, building peaks on your resume, and creating an impact, that's what the goal should be. And typical pointers would be getting a good score while pursuing your degree, trying out different internships, and doing good there at the same time, uh, trying out different positions of responsibilities and creating an impact there. These are some critical points which early students should think about.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And so there are some questions in the comment section. If you would
Sure.
like to take that.
Sure. How about you go through them and I'll answer them.
Sure, sure, sure. So the first question is, how can I, as a software engineer, switch to a VC firm?
Got it. Got it. So super interesting question. I think switching from a software engineering role to a VC fund is not very difficult if you have the right perspective in place. And by that I mean, let's say that if you're a software engineer at a startup, or even at an enterprise, let's say that that enterprise is in, or that startup is in the fintech space, or in general a software as a service space, or just solving a critical problem. If you have deep insight into that industry and not just understand that industry from a software perspective, but also from you know an an overall industry perspective. What are the different players? How are different players approaching it? What are the best practices in this industry? Get developing that entire point of view around your industry would really set you apart. And I've seen a lot of folks who have been in technical roles previously and have switched to a venture capital or private equity role just because they had very good grasp over the industry of what they're doing. So I would say this would involve going beyond your comfort level and not just understanding the technical aspect of things, but going into the business aspect of things in your own industry, because that would be easier for you to grasp. Doing that for one or two industries or another parallel industry would really help you create your own specialization. I think a lot of SaaS investors really understand software very well and come from a software background. So yeah, I think that should answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Parth, for answering that question. There's another question here. What is the most out of the box idea which a VC firm is invested in, which is very different from the current trend? Mm,
Got it. Got it. So we I think every week or two I hear some ideas which I'm either astonished at or I'm shocked to see. I'll talk about one such idea. It was also in the Web3 space itself. So, the founder was building a D2C brand which had both a virtual component and a real component. So he was essentially building a water company in Europe, and it was selling premium water, which is a very big market in Europe, by the way. The Now that essentially is fine, but the critical aspect of it is how it was using NFTs for marketing. So it had partnered with a lot of different large NFT projects, and those NFT projects were printed on. So if you buy a water can, and if you buy a water can, those water cans essentially had that NFT printed on the water can, and it essentially gave a real feel to hold an NFT in your hand. It was quite an interesting idea. We eventually passed on it, but it was, I would say, quite genius. Bringing digital components in, creating a real life counterpart to digital components. That was the key hook there, which somebody was, thinking quite well on. I think that's one idea. A second idea that I really like is data incentivization. And by that, today, the entire thesis around data is that, a lot of these social media companies, they're taking your data without your permission, and you don't have any incentive to share your data. uh, Web3 actually, helps provide you an incentive. And just to state the philosophy of it, you are awarded with a cryptocurrency if you're sharing your data with anybody. And that cryptocurrency holds value because an entire community of, you know, people who believe in this cause are funding it. And anybody who wants to buy that data, they have to fund the cryptocurrency. So essentially, that cryptocurrency becomes a very sustainable mode of, you know, transfer of data between a company and an individual. So that's one such idea which I really, really like, and I think good companies can be built around it.
There are some other questions, but I believe you've already answered them at some point
Yeah.
during our conversation.
Hmm.
So I think we covered a lot of aspects of your life, of
Yeah.
consulting in general, VC in general, and I would like to thank you for your time and energy, for giving us a understanding of how we can get into this field, how you got into this field, and so before we may end the discussion, I would, just in case if you would like to share something, a brief set of, advice, thoughts, or anything that you would like to share, please feel free.
I think the most important advice that I can share with anybody who's early in the career would be that, you know don't follow a path that is set out. Develop your own path, follow your own path, and I think doing what's right for you is the greatest justice that you can do for yourself. getting into the career option which is right for you. And even if you did something wrong in your career previously, iterating upon it and correct, there's no wrong time, there's no right time to or wrong time to correct, you know, uh, you know, any mistake that you've done. You can essentially, you know, change your career path anytime that you want. You can enter into new fields. You can, you know, do anything that you want if you have the right, you know, mental framework to do it and have the right hustle to do it. So hustling in your early days is very critical, and that's the key advice that I would give to any particular early stage, you know, student or employee. Yeah. So carving out your own path, I think that's in a few sentences.
Great.
Yeah.
This sounds like a very good set of things that you have mentioned in the overall conversation. And for all the viewers, for all the audience members, you can claim your e-certificate here. And wait, let us show the QR code as well. Mm, just a minute. Great. So let us close the session now. Thank you very much, Parth. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the event. Thank you very much, Parth, for your time.
Thank you, Vedang.